Hey everyone, continuing on the top of page 397. So, Dumbledore basically told Harry and Hermione that they can use Hermione's tool that she's been using all school year to take extra classes to turn back time and go fix this situation with Sirius Black. Because with Pettigrew escaped, there's no way that they can prove that Sirius is innocent. So right now, Harry and Hermione are going through, they went back in time and they're trying to fix this, and they can hear themselves from earlier in the story going down to deal with Buckbeak. So Harry had the idea to go save Buckbeak and then use Buckbeak to fly up to the top of the castle and save Sirius so he can escape and run for it so he doesn't have to go back to Azkaban since they can't prove his innocence. So that's where we are right now. If anyone's looking out of the window, Hermione squeaked, looking up at the castle behind them. We'll run for it, said Harry determinedly. Straight into the forest, all right? We'll have to hide behind a tree or something and keep a lookout. Okay, but we'll go around by the greenhouses, said Hermione breathlessly. We need to keep out of sight of Hagrid's front door or we'll see us. We must be nearly at Hagrid's by now. Still working out what she meant, Harry set off at a sprint, Hermione behind him. They tore across the vegetable gardens to the greenhouses, paused for a moment behind them, then set off again fast as they could, skirting around the whomping willow, tearing toward the shelter of the forest. Safe in the shadows of the trees, Harry turned around. Seconds later, Hermione arrived beside him, panting. Right, she gasped. We need to sneak over to Hagrid's. Keep out of sight, Harry. They made their way silently through the trees, keeping to the very edge of the forest. Then, as they glimpsed the front of Hagrid's house, they heard a knock upon his door. They moved quickly behind a white oak trunk and peered out from either side. Hagrid had appeared in his doorway, shaking and white, looking around to see who had knocked, and Harry heard his own voice. It's us. We're wearing the invisibility cloak. Let us in and we can take it off. You shouldn't have come, Hagrid whispered. He stood back, then shut the door quickly. This is the weirdest thing we've ever done, Harry said fervently. Let's move along a bit, Hermione whispered. We need to get nearer to Buckbeak. They crept through the trees until they saw the nervous hippogriff tethered to the fence around Hagrid's pumpkin patch. Now? Harry whispered. No, said Hermione. If we steal him now, those committee people will think Hagrid set him free. We've got to wait until they've seen he's tied outside. That's going to give us about 60 seconds, said Harry. This was starting to seem impossible. At that moment, there was a crash of breaking china from inside Hagrid's cabin. That's Hagrid breaking the milk jug, Hermione whispered. I'm going to find Scabbers in a moment. Sure enough, a few minutes later, they heard Hermione's shriek of surprise. Hermione, said Harry suddenly, what if we just run in there and grab Pettigrew? No, said Hermione in a terrified whisper. Don't you understand? We're breaking one of the most important wizarding laws. Nobody's supposed to change time, nobody. You heard Dumbledore. If we're seen, we'd only be seen by ourselves and Hagrid. Harry, what do you think you'd do if you saw yourself bursting into Hagrid's house? Said Hermione. I'd think I'd gone mad, said Harry, or I'd think there was some dark magic going on. Exactly. You wouldn't understand. You might even attack yourself. Don't you see? Professor McGonagall told me what awful things have happened when wizards have meddled with time. Loads of them ended up killing their past or future selves by mistake. Okay, said Harry. It was just an idea. I just thought... But Hermione nudged him and pointed toward the castle. Harry moved his head a few inches to get a clear view of the distant front doors. Dumbledore, Fudge, and the old committee member, and McNair the executioner were coming down the steps. We're about to come out, Hermione breathed. And sure enough, moments later, Hagrid's back door opened, and Harry saw himself, Ron, and Hermione walking out of it with Hagrid. It was, without a doubt, the strangest sensation of his life, standing behind the tree and watching himself in the pumpkin patch. It's okay, Beaky, it's okay, Hagrid said to Buckbeak. Then he turned to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Go on, get going. Hagrid, we can't... We'll tell them what really happened. They can't kill him. Go, it's bad enough without you lot in trouble and all. Harry watched the Hermione in the pumpkin patch throw the invisibility cloak over him and Ron. Go quick, don't listen. There was a knock on Hagrid's front door. The execution party had arrived. Hagrid turned around and headed back into his cabin, leaving the back door ajar. Harry watched the grass flatten in patches all around the cabin and heard 3 pairs of feet retreating. He, Ron, and Hermione had gone, but the Harry and Hermione hidden in the trees could now hear what was happening inside the cabin through the back door. Where is the beast? Came the cold voice of McNair. Outside, Hagrid croaked. Harry pulled his head out of sight as McNair's face appeared at Hagrid's window, staring out at Buckbeak. Then they heard Fudge. We have to read you the official notice of execution, Hagrid. I'll make it quick, and then you and McNair need to sign it. McNair, you're supposed to listen too. That's procedure." McNair's face vanished from the window. It was now or never. "Wait here," Harry whispered to Hermione. "I'll do it." As Fudge's voice started again, Harry darted out from behind his tree, vaulted the fence into the pumpkin patch, and approached Buckbeak. "It is the decision of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures that the Hippogriff Buckbeak, hereafter called the Condemned, shall be executed on the 6th of June at sundown." Careful not to blink, Harry stared up into Buckbeak's fierce orange eyes once more and bowed. Buckbeak sank to his scaly knees and then stood up again. Harry began to fumble with the knot of rope tying Buckbeak to the fence. "Sentenced to execution by beheading, to be carried out by the committee's appointed executioner, Walden McNair." "Come on, Buckbeak," Harry muttered. "Come on, we're going to help you. Quietly, quietly." "As witness below, Hagrid, you sign here." Harry threw all his weight onto the rope, but Buckbeak had dug in his front feet. "Well, let's get this over with," said the reedy voice of the committee member from inside Hagrid's cabin. "Hagrid, perhaps it will be better if you stay inside." "No, I want to be with him. I don't want him to be alone." Footsteps echoed from within the cabin. "Buckbeak, move!" Harry hissed. Harry tugged harder on the rope around Buckbeak's neck. The hippogriff began to walk, rustling its wings irritably. They were still 10 feet away from the forest, in plain view of Hagrid's back door. "One moment, please, McNair," came Dumbledore's voice. "You need to sign too." The footsteps stopped. Harry heaved on the rope. Buckbeak snapped his beak and walked a little faster. Hermione's white face was sticking out from behind a tree. "Harry, hurry!" she mouthed. Harry could still hear Dumbledore's voice talking from within the cabin. He gave the rope another wrench. Buckbeak broke into a grudging trot. They had reached the trees. "Quick, quick!" Hermione moaned, darting out from behind her tree, seizing the rope too and adding her weight to make Buckbeak move faster. Harry looked over his shoulder. They were now blocked from sight. They couldn't see Hagrid's garden at all. "Stop!" he whispered to Hermione. "They might hear us." Hagrid's back door had opened with a bang. Harry, Hermione, and Buckbeak stood quite still. Even the hippogriff seemed to be listening intently. Silence. Then, "Where is it?" said the reedy voice of the committee member. "Where is the beast?" "It was tied here," said the executioner furiously. "I saw it just here." "How extraordinary," said Dumbledore. There was a note of amusement in his voice. "Beaky!" said Hagrid huskily. There was a swishing noise and the thud of an axe. The executioner seemed to have swung it into the fence in anger. And then came the howling, and this time they could hear Hagrid's words through his sobs. "Gone, gone! Bless his little beak, he's gone! Must have pulled himself free. Beaky, you clever boy!" Buckbeak started to strain against the rope, trying to get back to Hagrid. Harry and Hermione tightened their grip and dug their heels into the forest floor to stop him. "Someone untied him!" the executioner was snarling. "We should search the grounds, the forest." "McNair, if Buckbeak has indeed been stolen, do you really think the thief will have led him away on foot?" said Dumbledore, still sounding amused. "Search the skies if you will. Hagrid, I could do with a cup of tea. Or a large coffee." "Oh, of course, Professor," said Hagrid, who sounded weak with happiness. "Come in, come in." Harry and Hermione listened closely. They heard footsteps, the soft cursing of the executioner, the snap of the door, and then silence once more. "Now what?" whispered Harry, looking around. "We'll have to hide in here," said Hermione, who looked very shaken. "We need to wait until they've gone back to the castle. Then we wait until it's safe to fly Buckbeak up to Sirius's window. He won't be there for another couple of hours. Oh, this is going to be difficult." She looked nervously over her shoulder into the depths of the forest. The sun was setting now. "We're going to have to move," said Harry, thinking hard. "We've got to be able to see the Whomping Willow, or we won't know what's going on." "Okay," said Hermione, getting a firmer grip on Buckbeak's rope. "But we've got to keep out of sight, Harry, remember." They moved around the edge of the forest, darkness falling thickly around them, until they were hidden behind a clump of trees through which they could make out the willow tree. "There's Ron," said Harry suddenly. A dark figure was sprinting across the lawn, and its shout echoed through the still night air. "Get away from him! Get away! Scabbers, come here!" And then they saw 2 more figures materialize out of nowhere. Harry watched himself and Hermione chasing after Ron. Then he saw Ron dive. "Gotcha! Get off, you stinking cat!" "They're serious," said Harry. The great shape of the dog had bounded out from the roots of the willow. They saw him bowl Harry over, then seize Ron. "It looks even worse from here, doesn't it?" said Harry, watching the dog pulling Ron into the roots. "Ouch, look! I just got walloped by the tree. And so did you. This is weird." The whomping willow was creaking and lashing out with its lower branches. They could see themselves darting here and there, trying to reach the trunk, and then the tree froze. "That was Crookshanks pressing the knot," said Hermione. "And there we go," Harry muttered. "We're in." The moment they disappeared, the tree began to move again. Seconds later, they heard footsteps quite close by. Dumbledore, McNair, Fudge, and the old committee member were making their way up to the castle. "Right after we'd gone down into the passage," said Hermione. "If only Dumbledore had come with us." "McNair and Fudge would have come too," said Harry bitterly. "I bet you anything Fudge would have told McNair to murder Sirius on the spot." They watched the four men climb the castle steps and disappear from view. For a few minutes the scene was deserted. Then, "Here comes Lupin!" said Harry as they saw another figure sprinting down the stone steps and hurrying toward the willow. Harry looked up at the sky. Clouds were obscuring the moon completely. They watched Lupin seize a broken branch from the ground and prod the knot on the trunk. The tree stopped fighting, and Lupin, too, disappeared into the gap in its roots. "If he'd only grabbed the cloak," said Harry. "It's just lying there." He turned to Hermione. "If I'd just dashed out now and grabbed it, Snape'd never be able to get it, and Harry, we mustn't been seen." "How can you stand this?" he asked Hermione fiercely. "Just standing here and watching it happen?" He hesitated. "I'm going to grab the cloak." "Harry, no!" Hermione seized the back of Harry's robes not a moment too soon. Just then they heard a burst of song. It was Hagrid making his way up to the castle, singing at the top of his voice and weaving slightly as he walked. A large bottle was swinging from his hands. "See," Hermione whispered. "See what would have happened? We've got to keep out of sight. No Buckbeak." The hippogriff was making frantic attempts to get Hagrid again. Harry seized his robe too, straining to hold Buckbeak back. They watched Hagrid meander tipsily up to the castle. He was gone. Buckbeak stopped fighting to get away. His head dropped sadly. Barely 2 minutes later, the castle doors flew open yet again, and Snape came charging out of them, running toward the willow. Harry's fists clenched as they watched Snape skid to a halt next to the tree, looking around. He grabbed the cloak and held it up. "Get your filthy hands off it," Harry snarled under his breath. "Shh!" Snape seized the branch Lupin had used to freeze the tree, prodded the knot, and vanished from view as he put on the cloak. "So that's it," said Hermione quietly. "We're all down there, and now we've just got to wait until we come back up again." She took the end of Buckbeak's rope and tied it securely around the nearest tree, then sat down on the dry ground, arms around her knees. "Harry, there's something I don't understand. Why didn't the Dementors get Sirius? I remember them coming, and then I think I passed out. There were so many of them." Harry sat down too. He explained what he'd seen, how, as the nearest Dementor had lowered its mouth to Harry's, a large silver something had come galloping across the lake and forced the Dementors to retreat. Hermione's mouth was slightly open by the time Harry had finished. "But what was it?" "There's only one thing it could have been to make the Dementors go," said Harry. "A real Patronus, a powerful one." "But who conjured it?" Harry didn't say anything. He was thinking back to the person he'd seen on the other bank of the lake. He knew who he thought it had been, but how could it have been? "Didn't you see what they looked like?" said Hermione eagerly. "Was it one of the teachers?" "No," said Harry. "He wasn't a teacher. But it must have been a really powerful wizard to drive all those Dementors away. If the Patronus was shining so brightly, didn't it light him up? Couldn't you see?" "Yeah, I saw him," said Harry slowly, "but maybe I imagined it. I wasn't thinking straight. I passed out right afterward." "Who did you think it was?" "I think," Harry swallowed, knowing how strange this was going to sound, "I think it was my dad." Harry glanced up at Hermione and saw that her mouth was fully open now. She was gazing at him with a mixture of alarm and pity. "Harry, your dad's, well, dead," she said quietly. "I know that," said Harry quickly. "You think you saw his ghost?" "I don't know. No. He looked solid. But then, maybe I was seeing things," said Harry. "But from what I could see, it looked like him. I've got photos of him." Hermione was still looking at him as though she worried about his sanity. "I know it sounds crazy," said Harry flatly. He turned to look at Buckbeak, who was digging his beak into the ground, apparently searching for worms, but he wasn't really watching Buckbeak. He was thinking about his father and about his father's 3 oldest friends, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Had all 4 of them been out on the grounds tonight? Wormtail had reappeared this evening when everyone had thought he was dead. Was it so impossible that his father had done the same? Had he been seeing things across the lake? The figure had been too far away to see distinctly, yet he had felt sure for a moment before he lost his consciousness. Time's up, guys.